Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are happy to have you here this evening, and I see we have, quite a few people still coming in. So what I'm gonna do is just allow just a minute more, let's say about 3 minutes, and then we'll get started. So in the meantime, take the time to connect with each other and let us know where you are coming from. Type it in the chat, and we look forward to having a wonderful time tonight. Thank you once again for joining us. So we will begin. Can everyone hear me well? Okay. Let me pause the music. So good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome you warmly to Grace Hill Bible University's Breaking the Silence, Opening the Door to Hope Grief Education webinar, presented by the students of the Master's Counseling Degree Program of Grace Hill Bible University. St. Maarten Campus. Please feel free once again to post your name in the chat and let us know where you're coming from, because I know that we are joined by people all over the world this evening. I believe we have New York represented. Of course, St. Maarten is represented. We have so many places represented this evening. And so I want you to get that opportunity to post your name and where you're coming from in the chat. I am Dr. Ernest Francis Cotton, and next to me is my husband, Mr. Roy Cotton Jr. And I'm sure many of you have heard his radio show, Love and Inspiration. And several of the students were on his program a few weeks ago. And so I'm going to allow you to just greet the people.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar this evening. It's a pleasure to have you here. We do appreciate you taking the time out to be with us this evening, and it promises to be very informative. And we do absolutely encourage you to interact when it's that time for interaction and to get the best out of this evening. So welcome to you once again, wherever you are coming in with us tonight from around the world.
Thank you, my dear.
You're welcome.
So I am Dr. Ernest Francis Cotton, the chair and developer of Grace Hill Bible University's counseling degree program for the St. Maarten Campus. And in light of our topic tonight, I can imagine that practically everyone on this call has lost a loved one during the year. So I invite us to observe a moment of silence as we honor the lives of all those who have departed this earth. So let us just observe a moment of silence as we think about them in gratitude for the lives that they have lived here on earth. Thank you. Let me briefly share about Grace Hill Bible University so you understand the mission and vision of the university. Grace Hill Bible University equips men and women for Christian living and Christian service worldwide. Grace Hill Bible University's vision is to bring glory to God and hope to the world by preparing students for Christian service. Grace Hill Bible University is accredited by Global Accreditation Association for Biblical Institutions, which is authorized by the state of New Jersey. The degrees and programs offered either meet or exceed the New Jersey status. All degrees awarded are of an ecclesiastical nature and should be deemed as such. The university was founded by its president, Dr. Aldanza Ambrose. The dean of the St. Maarten campus is Dr. Orlando Wilson. As a thank you to each of you for attending this webinar, you should have found a link pasted in the chat, which is our thank you gift to you, and it contains resources to help you to de-stress, best practices, protect yourself against COVID-19, information about Grace Hill Bible University and Victorious Living Foundation, of which I'm the visionary, and other great resources. And we will be posting additional information as time goes by. This is our way of saying thank you to each of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us. So who am I and why do I qualify to be able to develop and teach a master's level counseling degree program? I graduated with honors from the University of Tampa in 1995 with a BA in psychology. I earned a master's in counseling with emphasis in marriage and family therapy from the Oral Roberts University in 2000. I'm a certified success coach with the International Coaching Federation, a certified lifestyle prescriptions health coach, and an emotional freedom techniques practitioner. I also obtained specialized certification in trauma therapy. In short, I'm a master therapist who helps my clients achieve stellar results. Several years ago, I was asked by the Dean of Grace Hill Bible University to teach a biblical psychology class. And while preparing to teach that class, I did some soul searching and admitted to myself too many people in our societies are emotionally, psychologically, relationally, and spiritually challenged. As a result, our families and communities are experiencing dysfunctional and unhealthy relationships. I determined that if I am truly to help our students make an impact on our island and the world, they must be equipped to meet people where they hurt most and have the necessary skill set and mindset to transform their lives. Consequently, I set out to design and develop Grace Hill Bible University St. Maarten Campus's counseling degree program. I'm delighted to share that we've had our first group of pioneers who graduated last year. This year, thanks to COVID-19, we're now offering our classes online through our virtual classroom, compliments of Victorious Living Foundation, my organization. Therefore, anyone from around the world is able to access our courses as of this year. We provide the layperson, minister, or curious individual with the fundamentals of Christian counseling to be able to address the growing needs and challenges in our societies. Our courses include Christian counseling from an African indigenous perspective, utilizing energy, psychology, and counseling, effective counseling techniques for working with children, the fundamentals of marriage counseling, counseling ethics, counseling practicum and internship, suicide assessment, prevention and treatment, spouse abuse, a treatment program for couples, and effective grief counseling, and more, including training, practical training that students engage in within our community. This semester, our deep dive focus has been effective grief counseling. As we experience ramifications of the pandemic and how it impacts people's mental health, finances, and relationships, more persons may become despondent and go into despair. Consequently, this impacts their health and well-being. And unfortunately, the rate of death in our communities appear to be increasing at an alarming rate. This then leaves a void in our communities as many persons are unable to effectively cope. I am therefore pleased to introduce our students this evening who will present a short overview of some of the material they have learned this semester. Next semester, our focus will be on effective counseling techniques for working with children. If you're interested in enrolling in this course, please feel free to send me an email at info@victoriouslivingfoundation.com. This evening, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to our counseling degree students, Minerva P. Warner Hughes, who was born on the lovely island of St. Maarten. She has been a hospitality professional for the last 20 years. She loves the Lord and counts it a privilege to serve Him and be of service to His people. Her quest to serve has now resulted in her pursuing counseling at the Grace Hill Bible University St. Maarten Campus. Minister Rosanna Simona Ajide An ordained minister and prophetess, is a survivor, an overcomer, and a victor of multiple childhood abuse. She's passionate about education, healing the broken, and building healthy families in the kingdom of God. She's in her 5th semester in pursuit of her master's in Christian counseling. Agnes Aventurin was born and raised on St. Martin and is a proud mother of 2 children and 4 grandchildren. She is the church school superintendent and the chairperson for the organization and education committee of her home church. For many years, she served as Circuit Pastoral Council Secretary. Agnes is now retired from a job where she worked for over 40 years at NBGB, but still continues her journey in education, sharpening her skills in various areas. Toya Joseph was born on the island of Dominica, but has resided on St. Martin for many years. She's an anointed prayer warrior and author of Testimony of a Woman Scorned, in which she shares her powerful life story. Be sure to ask her how you may purchase your copy. These 4 dynamic students will be graded on their presentations tonight and for their preparations in executing this webinar. Therefore, do give them your support and love. In addition, you'll be introduced to 2 very special guest speakers joining us to share their own powerful grief stories. You're in for a great treat tonight. So with no further ado, I present to you Grace Hill Bible University's counseling degree program, Breaking the Silence, Opening the Door to Hope webinar. And our first presenter for this evening is none other than Minister Minerva P. Warner Hughes. Minerva?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Minerva P. Warner Hughes, and I will be presenting the many faces of grief. Every day, life carries losses and grief. Losses can be psychological, social, or occupational. Grief is the normal process of reacting to a loss. It is the emotional suffering felt when something or someone you love is taken away. These experiences can be subtle to life-altering and carry a range of emotional reaction, such as shock, anger, disbelief, guilt, and profound sadness. Coping with the loss of someone or something you love is one of life's biggest challenges, as grief is a part of love and love a part of life. Now let's look at the many faces of grief. Abortion, although one may say it's a choice, it still have a level of loss. Adoption, chronic illnesses, COVID-19, which have affected and changed the landscape of our lives for the last 11 months. Debt, we have been dealing with a lot of that, especially every student here tonight. So we ask for your indulgence with us as we continue to present even while going through. Divorce, no matter how amicable, still carries a degree of loss. Hurricane and storms. For us in St. Martin, we are all too familiar with the devastation and picking up the pieces of our lives after storms and hurricanes. loss of a body part that has traumatic experiences associated with it. Loss of cherished dreams. A young lady may have been wanting to marry a particular guy, and then at the end of it all, it did not come to fruition. That carries in itself some degree of loss. Loss of home, be it foreclosure, be it fire, loss of a job. I'm sure many viewing is familiar with this or know someone that is familiar with loss of a job in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Loss of pet. I remember a manager was sick for days after losing his pet. He just couldn't come to work. And we were like, it was just a dog, but for him, it was just more than just a dog. Migration, miscarriage, the taboo, yet all too familiar, all too common to women. Rape, retirement, sexual molestation, and we'll be hearing about that from one of the presenters later. Sexually transmitted infections, uncertainty of the future, which we, all of us at some point had that experience this year, because it's like, what next? What can possibly happen again? Because of the pandemic and because of all the challenges that life have been throwing at us, it's as if you're in a daze and in a dream. But that too affects your life, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. At this point in my presentation, I would invite you now to post your questions in the chat, or you can ask them so that I can go ahead and answer you to the best of my ability. We have 3 minutes in which to do so. I wouldn't want to think that I've been so clear that nobody have a question.
I do have a question. And can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay. So you mentioned, and I do know that, you've had quite a few losses yourself this year. And so based on the course, what are some of the things that you have implemented in your own life, during your process of grieving that could benefit some of our attendees tonight?
The key thing for me was self-care, learning when to back away, learning when to back down and go into retreat so that you can be fuel back up, so that you can, come back and face life. So that was a big thing for me. That was one that I personally took away, self-care, knowing when to stop, get off the roller coaster and just breathe and just be.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Well, none so far. I see someone said great presentation, Sister Minerva. So Sounds like you made an impact. So you may continue with the next.
I thank you. Since there's no more questions, please turn your attention now to my colleague, Prophetess Rosanna Ajide, who will be presenting symptoms of grief and how to effectively support someone who is grieving. Rosanna Ajide.
Thank you, Minister Minerva. Good night, everyone. My name is Rosanna Simone Ajide, and I'll be your second presenter for this evening. During the holidays, grief is usually even more challenging, especially in this year, 2020. We have suffered much traumatic losses due to COVID-19. Death by cancer, sudden and unexpected death, loss of jobs and homes, sexual molestation. The reality is we live in a grief illiterate society and many are often left with little support or understanding while they are hurting. The question is, many may ask, how do I really help someone who is hurting? Later on, we will see how we can help others. And why do we grieve? We grieve because we love, and in love, we experience loss. Grief is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be honored. Grief is not a disease from which we must be cured as soon as possible. Grief cannot be normalized because each individual grieves in his or her own unique way. Grief may be harder if the loss was sudden, an accident, a murder, or suicide. The intensity of the grief is determined by the intensity of the love relationship. For example, emotional security. Losing a spouse may mean losing resources. Ambivalence, positive and negative feelings. One may ask, did I do enough for him? Along with intense anger of being left alone. Or one may have had conflicts with the deceased, physical or sexual abuse, which was never resolved before the death, therefore left unfinished business. Codependent relationship. A spouse may find it difficult to adopt, which may result in chronic grief. That spouse will have to learn new ways of helping themselves and may not be ready to adapt to the new norms. When should mourning finish? Since grief is unique, there is no time frame as how one should grieve. Symptoms of normal grief. Feelings, sadness, anger, blame. Blame and anger usually goes together. Sometimes you didn't want the person to die, you get angry and you start blaming yourself or blaming the person that is closest to you. Guilt and self-reproach. May not have done enough for the deceased, therefore you're feeling guilty of something and you're having self-reproach. Anxiety, loneliness, fatigue, helplessness, shock, yearning, emancipation, feeling free, a sense of freedom because the person is now dead. I remember when I was a child and my father used to abuse us, how I would want him to die so bad that I even prayed for him to die. And whenever my mother would leave and go away, I used to feel so free because with him at home was always a pain. It's time of grief. So there we have it, relief. Numbness. These are all feelings that we experience during a loss. Physical sensation. Hollowness in the stomach, something I would get all the time. Tightness in the chest. Tightness in the throat, of which I'm experiencing right now for the last 3 weeks. I have been experiencing these physical sensations. Oversensitivity to the nose. All of this. A sense of depersonalization where nothing seems to be real, including self. Breathlessness, shortness of breath. Weakness in the muscles. And I could attest to this, that I have gone through these physical sensations and is still going through some of them. Lack of energy. Dry mouth, as is now. My mouth is just dry. Cognition. Grief affects the whole body, spirit, soul, and body. And sometimes these thoughts, if persist, they can trigger depression or anxiety. Disbelief, confusion, preoccupation, sense of presence, the sense of feeling the lost one passing by or just right next to you. Hallucination. Thoughts that are not real, you start feeling as if they are real. You start hearing voices or hearing persons calling you. If these should continue, it's a sign of depression or anxiety. Behaviors. These may correct themselves over time. Sleep disturbances. For this last 3 weeks, many of us have suffered sleep disturbances where we suffered to fall asleep and we fell asleep for 2 hours and then we were up for the rest of the night, not sleeping during the day, and the rotation continues. So while we're doing our presentation, we just thank you very much for keeping us in prayer. Eating disturbances. I have lost my appetite. Distracted and absent-minded behavior. Need something and forget what I was going to do. End up doing something else. Social withdrawal. I'm experiencing that right now too. Dreams of the deceased, very common. Avoiding reminders of the deceased. Searching and calling out. At first, when we heard about one person passing, We started, I know for two of us, we started to call the person's name and saying why. Sighing, restlessness or hyperactivity. You find yourself just going, and you just can't relax. Crying, visiting places or carrying objects that remind the survivor of the deceased. Treasuring objects that belonged to the deceased. Sure, some of us were there. How can I effectively support a person who is grieving? Grief belongs to the griever, and it's a personal experience. So we need to follow their lead. Don't try to fix their feelings or suggest what they should be doing right now. Stay present and state the truth. The person has lost someone close to their heart, and that is the truth. Death is very painful. It has been with us from creation, but it still hurts. Even though we know what we know what the Bible says, and we believe what the Bible says, death is still very painful. So avoid platitudes and let your friend or your loved one know that you are there for them. Do not try to fix the unfixable. Don't try to fix the grief. A loss is a loss, and it can never be fixed, nor repaired, nor solved. Do not try to take away the pain of the survivor. This is not about you. It is about the griever. In the early stage of grief, the pain will be hot or intense. Be prepared to witness the unbearable pain, the anger, the fear, the guilt, the frustration, the tiredness, the loneliness, all the different feelings I mentioned before. Please do not take away anything that has been thrown at you personally. It's not about you, as I said earlier. Make sure to have your own support group. While you're there supporting the person who is currently grieving, make sure you have someone or a group of persons who will be supporting you, because they will be throwing all their fears and anger and guilt at you. Anticipate, don't ask. We sometimes would like to ask, say, oh, if you need something, just call me, or what can I do for you? We don't do that, because in grief or intense grief, they will not be able to identify needs, much less to make a phone call. You will need to be reliable and make concrete offers. Just be a true friend to your grieving friend. Do the reoccurring things. For example, walk the dog, do the groceries, bring in the mails, do the dirty laundry with permission. And I would like to state a little story here. One person lost her husband, and a friend went and decided to help her do the laundry, and they washed everything. When the friend realized what was happening, she got angry because she said she needed her husband's dirty clothes so she could have his scent with her. So let us be very careful when we go to help. We need to ask permission. Tackle projects together Assist in planning the funeral if it's possible. Sometimes your friend is alone and her husband is dead or the wife is dead, and they need someone to stand with them to help them to plan the funeral. Be a good friend and just help them do what they have to do. Be the gatekeeper. Protect your friend from becoming overwhelmed with the influx of persons. You know, when a loved one is dead, we have all these friends, and we know Caribbean people, we live it. We know how we are. We rush into people's house, and not all the time they like it. People don't always like people to rush into their homes. So be that gatekeeper to protect your friend. Educate and advocate. Subtle answers can normalize grief. For example, persons may come and ask, oh, how is Rosanna doing? Be smart and say, oh, she has better moments and worse moments. Don't give too much details. Be willing not to have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. Don't try to answer all the questions. Listen, be there, be present, and be a friend. Love lasts forever. An intense loss changes every details of one's life. There is no going back to the normal way of life, but it's about allowing yourself to come under the pain and to grow with the pain. Grief never really stops, especially childhood molestation, something that I have experienced. We only learn to live with it, but it never stops. It continues with us. There are times in my quiet time when I will just remember everything and maybe cry a little, pray a little, and just get up, wash my face, and continue with life. Okay, grief is something that we carry in different ways for the rest of our lives. Thank you very much. This has come to the end of my presentation tonight, and I have 2 to 3 minutes. If you have any question, please ask, and I will try to answer to the best of my ability.
Eversley Warner, Antigua. I would like to make a comment on your presentation. First, wonderful presentation. Now, in terms of grieving, right, we tend, well, I can speak for the Caribbean, not to really show appreciation for our loved ones. And I am wondering whether that sense of not showing appreciation has really increased grieving, in that because we did not show the type of appreciation that we needed to show to the deceased, then grieving becomes more for us. So I wonder whether you could comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and welcome, Antigua. I believe that I see my colleague is smiling. I'm part Antiguan too, don't worry. I believe, as you said, because we have not shown much appreciation in life to our loved ones, sometimes grief can become more intense. As I mentioned earlier, it could be ambivalent feelings, or we have unfinished business. We did not do what we were supposed to do while the person was alive, and now the person is dead. It hurts more. Or it could be a codependent. The person is dead, and now For example, I depend on my husband for everything, and now he is dead. I have to learn new ways to adapt. The other thing is, because of our society illiterateness towards death and grief, we tend to grieve more. Did I answer your question?
You sure did. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, Prasanna, you mentioned that, you know, the person should not use platitudes. Just in case, just in case there are persons who don't understand what platitudes are, could you give an example of what that is?
Thank you, Dr. Erdeme. Platitudes are the little sentences we tell a person when someone died, oh, they're in a better place. Oh, at least you had some time with them. Oh, you could make another baby. Those little things that we say to persons at time, I know for me and one of my colleagues especially, we don't appreciate it because it makes no sense at the time of the loss. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you. And you got a compliment also from Mr. Francis saying very good presentation.
Thank you. As you continue to pray for us, that God will keep us during this presentation. And now I will present to you a young lady who is in the midst of us, and she will be telling her story. Her story is on childhood sexual molestation, and she's none other than Christella Peer. She is an overseas student. She is a St. Martiner, currently studying in Holland, and she is coming out for the first time. She's breaking the silence on sexual molestation. Christella, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, can you go ahead and tell your story to our listeners? Thank you very much.
Yes. I have been sexually abused by my biological father, and it was not something nice. It was very painful, and I had so much hatred for him. I also did not like myself. At that time, I wanted to die. I was asking and praying God to take me from the face of this earth because I couldn't understand. I was confused because I saw him as a person that, you know, had to protect me and had to be there for me. But instead, he did the opposite. He was the one to destroy a part of my life, I would say. So that has brought so much grief and pain to my heart, you know, and things were very much downhill for me at that time. I was in pain. I did not know who to turn to. I did not know how to speak of it because I was ashamed of it. I was very much ashamed of the situation. I just couldn't let it out. And I would pray, I would be crying at home, sitting down, crying, just crying, and just don't know who to turn to. I would cut myself up and be very much devastated of the situation. I would be in school, and when I hear the teachers are speaking about sexual abuse, and tears would just come down to my eye because of the fact that I have been through it, and I was ashamed of even listening to it. Even listening to it was a problem to me. It was a problem. I just couldn't. I started to cry. And when they would ask, what is wrong with you? I would say nothing. Nothing is wrong. So that has bring so much pain to my heart, and living there for at least, that started at the age of 12. So living there almost all my life, because right now I'm 28 years old, and I had to stay in the situation where I did not want to be. I did not want to be there. I used to ask God, why did you put me in this family? Why did you put me? Why me? Why this had to happen to me? And those were questions that I did not get answers to, you know. And every day I would have to like ignore the situation and act like everything is okay in the house. There are times where I would pass and he would be laying down on the floor trying to look under my skirt. And there's this one time that my mother caught him molesting me. And she was like, if anyone asks you about the situation, you know, not to talk about it. So that also kept me silent, because my mother, I respected my mother, you know, I still do respect her. But at that time, I had to remain silent because my mother told me to remain silent about the situation. And even before I left to go to study, that same father, he still did not change his ways. He came to me and he told me, he sit me down, he tell me, let me talk to you as my daughter. So I thinking now, okay, things good. And he changed, but he did not change. He told me if he wants to give me $8,000, but I have to have sex with him in order for me to get that $8,000. Me thinking that he was a changed person. So that even bring even more anger to my heart, because I couldn't believe my ears. I still, even when that has happened to me, I still had some form of denial within, because that at that time I was in shock. All I could have done is just got up and block him from my phone and just delete him. So I was really very much in pain up until the age of 27. I still had to deal with the situation, and I just had to figure out a way to block him out completely. And it is not something that is easy to deal with. And growing up in that situation, you may see the students them in school and they may be silent. You don't know what's going on in their homes. You may see them smiling, but inside they're dying. So that was me. That was the child I was. I was very much a quiet person in school, and at home getting tormented by my father. Getting tormented and harassed by my father. And I had to stay in that situation and act like everything was perfect at home. And everyone saw him like this perfect person that can do no harm. So that was also eating me inside, because I could not even tell anyone about the situation. When they would say, why don't you refer to him as your father? No, I don't want to. He kind of destroyed that role as a father. He broke that. So even now, I do not like refer to him as a father because of that. So this is something that I know I will have to deal with, and it's not me. I had to also forgive myself, because I used to blame myself. I used to say, oh, you stupid idiot, you should have never, let that happen to you. You could have done something. But in reality, I could have done nothing. He would tell me if I talk, he's going to kill me. So all of these things brought fear to me also, because only recently I started talking about it, but in-house. So it was something that I had to deal with for 27 years of my life. It was not nice. It was very painful. There were times where I did not want to live. I did not want to see myself. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I saw myself as ugly and defiled as a person. So it's something that I was grieving for so many years. And I just thank God for his grace still and for keeping me alive, because if he had taken me out when I wanted to be taken out, then I would not have been here today to share this message with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christella. Thank you for being so brave and for telling your story. At this time, you can message your, send your question in the message box, and we will try to answer you as short as possible. At this time, we introduce our third presenter, Agnes Adventuring, who will do childhood grief. Welcome, Agnes.
Rosanna, before Agnes comes, I'd just like to just acknowledge Christella. So Christella, just want to let you know that we sincerely appreciate the fact that you've had so much courage to be able to share. And I know that it's not easy. And so especially, especially having gone through from such a young age, being molested, what can you share to the parents that are on the line right now? Parents, teachers, because we also have teachers on the line that may encounter persons who are molested, but they don't know it and they're acting out in school. What kind of tips can you offer them?
Thank you, Dr. Nicole, for your question. What I can say is, parents, you have to look out for your children. Like, you have to try to see the things that you probably wasn't focusing on with your child. You have to see how the child starts to behave, because the behavior does change. The child does not be that happy child that child once was. So you have to pay attention to your child's behavior. You have to be able to notice certain behaviors. If it's your husband, it could even be the mothers doing it. So you have to pay attention to that, to see the behavior of your child. That's one thing I can say you can focus on, is the behavior of your child, because the behavior will change. That child will have some form of bitterness within their heart. And you have to also know your partner. See the behavior of your partner as well. The way he's behaving, maybe the sneakiness, because it will start as something sneaky. Because my thing used to happen while I'm sleeping. So it will start as something sleeping. Check on your child every time you put your child to bed. Check on your child as the mother. Make sure that that child is sleeping and the door is locked or closed. Something. You have to pay attention to those things as parent.
Thank you so much, Christella. Those are very sound words that you've given, and we appreciate you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Again, I must say thank you, Christella, for breaking the silence. And I am here for you as was before. And now I welcome Agnes again. Agnes, you may continue with the presentation. Thank you.
I thank you very much, Rosanna, for that introduction. And good evening to one and all. This evening, My presentation is on understanding how children grieve. It's my hope that the information I share with you today will begin to break the silence of grief and start the process to open the door to hope as it did to me. Before I continue, I have a question for you. And in response to the questions I'm about to ask, I would like you to In response to the questions I'm about to ask, I invite you to type your answers in the chat. The first question is, do children grieve? Do children grieve? Do they understand death or a loss? Third question is, how do we respond to children when they attempt to ask questions? The final question is, do we shut them up or ignore them? Now, we know that children have feelings and they do grieve. Many years ago, people argued that children do not understand death and loss, so they do not experience grief. People felt that children don't grieve because they continue to play as if everything is okay. Studies show that children do grieve in their own way or similar to grown-ups. Clinical psychologist Dr. Christina Hibbert states, the more we seek to understand children's grief and the different methods for treating grief in children, the better the odds that our children will not only get through their grief, but that family relationships can be strengthened through the process too. So then what can we do? We can let our children know that they can ask us anything. We can let them see our own grief in a way that says, this hurts, and it's okay to feel that way. Morgan Devine, author of It's Okay That You Are Not Okay states, we can ask them to share how they are feeling, knowing that they may not be willing or able to voice what they feel. We can discuss the word of God with them and encourage them to rely on him. The writer of Proverbs says that as parents, we are to bring up our children in the way they should go, so when they become old, they will never depart from it. We can also keep a positive, consistent routine with our children and seek counseling for the child if it deems necessary. What we need to know about children's grief and their losses. First, it's important to understand a little bit of the losses children grieve about in their early stages of childhood, going into their adulthood. They are as follows: loss of pets, death of a grandparent, a major move, divorce of the child's parents, death of a parent or parent, death of a sibling, a playmate, a friend, or relative, unbearable injury to the child or someone important in the child's life, long-lasting physical fights and arguments between parents in the home, a school shooting or school bombing, guilt, death, fear of the unknown. Hidden losses are also common in children's early childhood, such as loss of trust, loss of safety, or loss of control. For example, when parents divorce, the child not only experiences the physical loss of having her family together, but perhaps an even bigger loss for the child might be her loss of a sense of safety and control. Many times, children feel they are the cause of their parents' divorce. Any loss, obvious or hidden, can produce a grief response in children. It is therefore important for adults to learn about these things in order to help children identify and address their losses and understand how to deal with their grief. Children of all ages experience grief. Though in the past, it might have been argued that a child must be able to comprehend death and loss in order to experience grief, we now know that's not true. In fact, now we know that even very young children will experience grief when they lose someone very near and dear to them, especially a caregiver. Infants may become brokenhearted. Toddlers may have trouble sleeping or behavioral distress. And preschoolers may talk continually about the deceased, fully believing their loved one will return. Young children will especially be affected if their caregiver is grieving, picking up on their parents' distress and feeling it themselves. Others are abused physically, emotionally, or sexually. Some children might be molested or raped, experiencing loss of sleep. Yes, no matter how young the child may be, if she or he is old enough to love, then the child is old enough to experience grief. As Megan Devine says, we grieve because we love. In addition, it's important for adults, caregivers, to understand the following: that children grieve differently than adults. There are over 100 acknowledged grief symptoms, and most people, meaning children and adults, experience their own unique symptoms of grief. However, the pattern of grief in adults tends to be more of a sustained emotional experience than it is for children. Children's grief symptoms can include intense feelings, but they tend to come and go, with periods of intense grief symptoms followed by periods of apparent happiness and well-being, often all within the same day. Children's grief symptoms. A child may manifest symptoms that seem similar to common adult symptoms of grief, like crying, lethargy, sadness, bargaining, anxiety, anger, and even numbness or denial. Eating and sleeping changes are also common in grieving children. Often, however, grief will show up in other, more subtle ways. Learning and attention issues may arise, and their performance in school or activities may suffer. Behavioral issues like irritability, arguing, and fighting can be common for some. Others will withdraw, disengaging from friends, family, or activities they used to enjoy. Children are also likely to experience a roller coaster of emotional highs and lows and may not be sure how to handle what they feel. Children, children tend to grow up with grief, revisiting it as the brain develops. As the brain develops and matures, comprehension of death and loss increases. This is why grief can feel like it randomly comes and goes with children. Their younger brains can be protective in times of loss, helping them move on easier than adults who fully comprehend the finality of death. However, mourning for a childhood loss can be revived at many points in life, especially when important life events reactivate the loss. A new wound makes all the old ones ache again. This is a quote from Millian McLaughlin. Stress from schoolmates, friends, or family members can bring out grief symptoms and reactions. The teenage years are another vulnerable time for experiencing grief as abstract thinking develops and hormones hit. And some may experience only minor grief symptoms in childhood, but won't experience major grief symptoms until they are adult and they can fully comprehend the loss. The important thing is to recognize that no matter how or when it happens, grief will eventually hit and will need to be experienced in order to heal. I will interject here for a moment and I will share an experience I had and that is still with me. Growing up in our home, there were physical fights and big arguments between my parents. They both worked hard to make ends meet. I was left with the responsibility to take care of my siblings and at times babysit other people's children. With all those things, I had my other chores to do before my parents got home and still had to complete my school assignment before 6 p.m. There were consequences if I did not fulfill my task. This has continued to follow me up until now, as I feel deprived of my childhood days, and has affected my life up until now. Children can be forgotten in their grief, especially when surviving parents, siblings, or grandparents are grieving too. Grieving parents may not be able to help their child grieve. It's my hope. Oh. I'm sorry. Children can be forgotten in their grief, especially when surviving parents, siblings, or grandparents are grieving too. Grieving parents may not be able to help their children through grief. Often when a child dies, the surviving siblings are left to cope on their own, feeling lonely and afraid. Parents don't intend to forget their children's grief, but it does happen often. Also, well-meaning, attentive adults. Also, well-meaning, attentive adults might see a grieving child playing or laughing and make the mistake of thinking they are fine or over their grief. This can have an impact on the type and amount of help and support a grieving child receives. It is therefore important to involve as many adults with the child as is helpful and necessary to get his or her needs met. School teachers, church leaders, friends, and extended family members can all play the role of watching the child for grief symptoms, providing support and encouragement, and loving the child through this difficult time. I'd like to interject here again. One day, something happened and it brought back terrible memories to my son as a grown man. He held his head and mentioned it to me. I was stunned by this reaction. For some reason, I never realized that my children were grieving and having sleepless nights just as I was. I was either very busy worrying about what was going on in my life or finding ways to fix it, that I overlooked the trauma my children were experiencing just as I was feeling. The important point is that the more we understand about children and grief, the better we can help them heal. Take the time to learn all you can about children, loss, and grief, and what you can do to help. Then be with the child and just love them through their grief. Pay attention to their children. Be observant and ready to provide support when it's needed. You can make all the difference. Now, let's rely on the promises of God. Rest assured, brethren, be reminded that sin came into this world and created havoc on men's life. We will endure all types of sufferings. Bringing up our children in the knowledge of Christ will also help them to look to God in these turbulent times. Grief will never go away. It will be alleviated, yes, or it might never go away. But rest assured that one day we will not experience any more pain and no more tears, no more sleepless nights or grief. The Bible repeatedly speaks of such a time, describing what conditions on earth will then be like. The Bible states in Revelation 21, verse 3-4, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, see, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell within them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first thing has passed away. I have some suggestions that can be used by parents with their children when they are going through some grief problems. You can first give the child a personal Bible. You can have the child draw pictures that reflect one's feeling as well as experience with the deceased. Have them journal their thoughts. Let the child express freely how he or she feels or thinks about the deceased. Have the child take flowers or a card he or she self has designed and take it to the cemetery if they wish to. This is the end of my presentation. And if there are any questions concerning my presentation, feel free to ask. I have 2 to 3 minutes to respond.
Thank you so much for your presentation. You've received a note in the chat saying thank you. What you presented is really true. So I'm aware that you also have grandchildren that are grieving and so forth from very tragic losses. What has the experience been like for your grandchildren, and what are some of the things that you have done personally to help your grandchild?
Well, I listen a lot to what she's saying, and sometimes she surprises me. She really had a bond with him, especially her uncle, the last one that died. And what I noticed on her own, she started drawing things or writing to him. And she would ask me to take her to the cemetery so she can carry it for him. And, you know, in my back of my head, I'm like, but this isn't going to work because he's not there. He doesn't know what's going on. But I do it and I realize it makes a difference to her. Um, it releases some type of a feeling. It really releases the pain, even if it is not for forever, but it happens. And then we talk about him a lot. We talk about other family members a lot, and I think that is one of the things that is helping her, and it's helping me too in the meanwhile while I'm discussing things with her and following her examples.
Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. Now, it gives me great pleasure to call on the next speaker, who's none other than Toya Joseph. Toya's presentation is on self-care and disenfranchised grief. Toya, welcome.
Disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief refers to grief experiences that are not openly acknowledged, socially accepted, or publicly mourned. It is known as also hidden grief. Grief becomes disenfranchised when loss is socially neglected. In this dimension of social factors, complicated grief is less recognized by the individual, and people close to them behave as though the loss doesn't occur. Certain events that are often looked at with stigma can also cause disenfranchised grief, such as the breakup of a sacred relationship, or example, extramarital affairs. The diagnosis of a sexual transmitted infection, such as AIDS and COVID-19. The grief of family and friends who survive stigma-related deaths, such as COVID-19 and AIDS diagnosis, is often complicated. Family members are scared to disclose the cause of death for fear of discrimination in society and workplaces. Disenfranchised grief is when no one seems to understand your grief. When we place the value on something or someone we love and it is taken away from us, we mourn. This is part of life. No matter what type of loss you have experienced or are experiencing, your loss is valid. Unfortunately, Some losses draw more stigma than compassion. The reaction of others might make you feel ashamed or embarrassed instead of comforted. Still, society often fails to acknowledge some type of grief, making it challenging to express your sadness or begin to navigate the healing process. Examples of loss that is disenfranchised: death by suicide or overdose, abortion, miscarriage, stillborn birth, death of an online friend or pen pal. Disenfranchised grief can lead or contribute to complicated grief or unaddressed grief. Grief that involves prolonged unresolved feeling, a sense of feeling overwhelmed, and symptoms of traumatic stress. The type of grief also contributes to mental health symptoms, including clinical depression, anxiety disorder, substance abuse, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The key to helping a grieving loved one. Many people truly want to help a friend or family member who is experiencing a severe loss. Words often fail us at times, leading us uncomfortable and searching for the right things to say. Here are some ground rules for helping someone who is grieving. Don't try to fix the unfixable. Your friend's loss cannot be fixed, replaced, or resolved. The pain itself cannot be made better. Do not say anything that tries to fix what is already lost. Don't compare grief. Every person's grief is different, and no two persons grieve the same. It is tempting to offer your own experience of grief to let the grieving person know you understand, but you don't really understand the pain the person feels, even though your loss may be similar. Ask questions about the experience. You can connect with the griever by showing curiosity about what this is like for them. It is good to let them know you are familiar with how overwhelming grief can be. Don't give compliments. When someone you love is in pain, they don't need to be reminded that they are smart, beautiful, resourceful, or a fantastically good person. Don't tell them that they are strong or brave, but you can tell them all the things you love and admire about them. This will help them as they move through this experience. Remind them that they are or you are there for them and can always lean on you when the load of grief gets too heavy to carry. Don't judge. Above all, show your love. Be accountable. Be willing to stand beside that gaping hole that has opened in the griever's life without turning away. Be willing to listen, be present. Love is an emotion that lasts. What should you do while grieving? Practice self-care. The World Health Organization defines self-care as the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote and maintain health. Promotion of self-care is a means to empower individuals, families, and communities. Self-care is a map for survival. Taking care of all aspects of you will increase the livelihood that you stay well. Recovery is a constant process, and continue to set goals for yourself will help you motivate to reach and maintain wellness. To help support you in your recovery, there are some guidelines you may follow. Live healthy. Eat healthy foods. Get enough and quality rest. Exercise regularly. And avoid drugs and alcohol. Have regular medical checkups. Practice good hygiene. Good hygiene is important for social, medical, and psychological reasons, in that it's not only reduce the risk of illnesses, but also improve the way others view you and you view yourself. Socialize. Associate with friends who are positive influence in your life, one that build your sense of belonging. Consider joining a support group to make new friends. Emotional release, like dancing, which help you to release some frustration and anger when you exercise. Spiritual development. You can read books that uplift your spirit, which is a greatest example, the Bible. Here, I'm about to present you with a true story. A story of a disenfranchised grief. There is a young man who has one child. He felt life was too difficult to take care of the child financially. So he decided to have a vasectomy. Years after, he got married to a woman that wanted children. But unfortunately, he could not give her any. The doctor tried to undo the process or the procedure, but in the process, his wife got pregnant. He had doubts that the child was his. As a result, the young man is grieving about it privately. This story is a powerful example of how disenfranchised grief can impact someone's life. In a case such as this, it should be recommended that he seeks professional counseling to work through his grief. If you are in a place where you recognize that you are experiencing disenfranchised grief, I invite you to book an appointment with Victorious Living Counseling and Coach Service through Dr. Enemy Francis Cotton, our professor, or another competent professional will help you to work through your grief. At this time, I invite you, the audience, to close your eyes. Breathe in life. Exhale whatever negative emotions are rising in this moment. Take another deep breath. Hold for a count of 7 and exhale slowly from your mouth. Take another deep breath. As you inhale, hold your breath for a count of 7. Then exhale slowly from your mouth. Great job. Now evaluate yourself. When was the last time you had self-care? At this time, I invite you to ask me any question. Any question you want to ask?
Thank you, Toya. You did a great job, I'm seeing in the chat. And I would like to let persons know that we have a poll that is going on right now. It says impact of the webinar. And so if you have not yet answered the poll, please do so. And do you have any questions at all for Toya? Toya, do you have any experience of disenfranchised grief yourself that you care to share about, or you're good for now?
I have an experience which is very personal to me. It's a personal experience. And this is very common in women. And a number of women around the world is suffering with this illness. And many are suffering with pain, and they can't really talk about it because of the stigma, the stigmatization that is in society concerning women. And the illness was fibrous. And I had to do a vasectomy, which is removing of part of the womb. And women are afraid to talk about it because they feel ashamed. And the reason why they feel ashamed is because of society has placed so much demand on women without having children when they are married or they are in a relationship. Before I did this procedure, I was asking women concerning this procedure because it was my first experience, and they were saying, why you have to do this? You are not married, and who is gonna pick you up in this condition? Which man are gonna get married to you in this condition? Because society believes that when you're married to the man and you can't give a man a child, you consider you are stigmatized. It considered shameful in the marriage or shameful in the relationship. And many women are going through this grief, this enfranchised grief. They are suffering privately. Nobody knows what they are going through, and they cannot tell people about it because they're afraid that they will feel ashamed, and society will not acknowledge their grief. This is what I experienced while I was going through this suffering and still going through the suffering of this enfranchised grief, even right now.
Thank you for sharing.
It's a painful experience.
Thank you so much for sharing, Toya, regarding that hysterectomy, and we acknowledge it, and we also are grateful that you spoke out so powerfully that you may be liberating some other women who have had to experience that. So thank you. And for those of you who have not yet answered the poll, please do so at this time. And I'm going to, if you have no further questions for Toya, I'm going to invite Minister Minerva to introduce her next speaker.
Our next speaker is no stranger to many of us. She is known as a strong, no-nonsense person in her place of work with the government. She is loyal. She is the sweetest friend one can have. Once she knows you, she will go to bat for you. I take great privilege in introducing the following speaker, and I would let her tell of her experience with grief in her own words. Sharon, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sharon Candida, and I really enjoyed the webinar tonight. It held a lot of information that I think is very valuable to people that are dealing with grief in different facets of life. However, I was asked to present on the death of my brother, but in 1998, I not only lost my brother, I lost five family members in one car accident. And about 20 days before that, I lost my grandfather, my maternal grandfather. So it was a horrible year, as you would put it. Those that, of us that don't have faith, we would say it was a horrible year. For me, it was a learning experience. I I have never spoken about my feelings or the experience of losing my brother, of never meeting my nephew. I met him in a casket, of never meeting my sister-in-law. She was beyond recognition, so I saw her on picture. And my nephew, that I stood as midwife and saw him come into the world, I had to bury him. So death for me is something that I don't deal with quite easily. But as one of the presenters before said, you never get over it. It's 22 years. And every year on the 24th of October, it seems as if it just happened yesterday. The memories continues. You try to live that normal life. You try to move on, but you don't. And I like what Ms. Ajade said when she said, you don't give those little small speeches that it goes away. Oh, it's gonna get better. They're in a better place. Someone said that to me and I flipped and I said, how do you know that? The best place for them was here with me. So how can you tell me that they're in a better place? So I do agree with those, with the statement. You have to know what to say, when to say, how to say it. And sometimes if you don't know what to say, it's best to just be quiet. Your presence alone is enough for the person that's going through whatever situation they're going through dealing with death. Death is something that's final. And unless you've experienced it, you wouldn't know how to deal with it. Sometimes you would see me at family wakes or family funerals, and I have nothing to say, because what do you say to people when they are hurting? What comfort can you give them? You don't know the depth of their hurt. So for me, since I've experienced it, I prefer to just be that person that you can see I'm there to support. I'm there because I care. I'm not there to take away your pain, because I can't. Because to today, nobody can take away that pain. Nobody can take away the void of my brother that I grew up with and lost him at the tender age of 24. So how do you deal with grief? There's a lot of things written in books. There's a lot of things that people can tell you, but nobody can help you unless they've walked that mile with you. And yes, it depends on the relationship that you had with the person. That depends how you grieve. Everybody grieves differently. I had to be strong. I've always had the personality of being that strong person. And my sisters and we had no choice but to be strong, because we had to be there for my mom. So then you can't grieve how you want, because you got to remember that if you break, your mom breaks, and you're trying to be that that pillar of strength when you yourself feels like you can't hold it together. So I really like a lot of what was said tonight. A lot of it is comforting. A lot of it is are things that can be used. But again, I say, in grief, to each his own. Everybody deals with it differently. Everybody reacts differently. There are people that cry. There are people that screams. I mean, I listen to Agnes as well. You have the children. And we were sort of lucky that God took him and his son, so we didn't have the child grief to deal with. But that was his biological child. He still left behind some stepchildren that up to today, every now and then you'd look on Facebook and you'd see one of the children put up, or if my dad was here, or I'm doing this in your honor, Dad. So 22 years later, and it is still reality. It is still something that you deal with because this person was part of your life for whatever amount of years, and you just don't erase that by putting them in a box. It doesn't go away. So I'm putting, again, the strong me forward. I think everybody on this chat, I see a couple of people on here that knows me. And even though you're broken inside, you tend to put that strong facade, that strong face that you think society needs to see. Because to be broken is a form of weakness. And I think that is a stigma that needs to be taken away, that it's okay to scream. At funerals, people tend to want to hush you. I say scream, because at the end of the day, when you hold it in and you go home, it's you and the walls. And our culture, we tend to have, as I would say, the eating time. When people die, we look at it as a party. You go to the house and you have drinks and you got food. But in the meantime, you are drinking and you are eating, but the person is there in pain. And then after the funeral, everything stops and the reality steps in. And I always say, the support is not needed when the person dies. The support is needed when the person is buried. That is when the reality steps in, and then you realize they're never coming back. The void is there. But our society tends to put the cart before the horse. And I think that is something as well that needs to be addressed, how the support system is set up. Because in our time of grief, we were traveling. So I thank God in all ways that we had to deal with it differently. And for me, I think that the healing process wasn't easy, but it was simple because I lived in St. Martin and my brother lived in Kansas. So in my mind of minds, at times, I still think the phone is going to ring and he'll be on the other end. In reality, it's not so. So I say again, grief, you deal with it in different ways, and it depends on the situation, and it depends on the relationship as well. So Minerva, I thank you for the opportunity to share, but I think I've reached my limit.
We want to thank you. We acknowledge your grief. I can see you're having a rough time even up to now. I see you trying to hold it together. And I want to say to you that it's okay not to be okay. There are times you have to just let go of the facade and allow yourself to experience it. You've been holding on to that strong personality and strong character for a very long time. And even up to today, when we spoke, you were like, today was not such a good day. But I thank you that you allow yourself to be transparent, that you allow yourself to feel, and that you allow yourself to be used so that somebody else can come to healing.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Minister Minerva. Thank you so much, Sharon. It's I truly appreciate the fact that you were transparent and authentic. And we have posted in the chat a link of resources. And within that link of resources, there's also a closed Facebook group, which I have asked and have instructed the students that we will create a support group. So when you click on the link and you access the resources, for those persons who know that a support group would be beneficial for you, It's an opportunity for us to begin to heal and to discuss and to talk and to break the silence, as Toya coined tonight's session, breaking the silence and opening the door to hope. So thank you once again, Sharon.
Thank you.
Rosanna?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here. Well, we have come to the end of our presentation tonight. So I'll hand you over to Dr. Cotton, who will give her closing remarks.
Thank you, Rosanna. Are there any persons particular that you guys would like to thank?
Whenever we'll do the vote of thanks.
We want to go ahead and give God thanks for this platform, for being here. We want to thank you as well, Dr. Cotton, for challenging us to go the distance, for challenging us to be transparent and authentic in our grief, even as we go through the course. We want to thank your husband for being with us and journeying with us throughout this. We also want to thank everyone who logged on in support of this webinar. We want to thank Crystal Pale for sharing your ordeal with such bravery. We pray that God bless you and give you his peace. We want to thank Sharon for coming on and letting us see the face of grief even years after, because a lot of people will tend to think that you've moved on, you've advanced, you're okay, not recognizing that you carry this, as one speaker said this evening, you carry it differently, but you carry it for the rest of your life. We want to thank everyone. And I also want to especially thank my fellow pioneers for being a support pillar and for just helping us, each one of us, at this time. Thank you, guys. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Minerva. Thank you so much for all of you doing a great job tonight. Could you, as our audience, could you give them your hugs and claps and all those wonderful things in the chat? If you could do that, please, I would appreciate that, because they have done a tremendous job. And I want to give the opportunity right now to anyone in the audience who would like to share. Just a few minutes of sharing from the audience would be appreciated. Anybody that feels brave to share about what you've gained from tonight, and any questions or any comments? Jardin Fennis says, great job to everyone. Thank you so much. Anyone else? If you let me know, then I can unmute your mic. So Yvonne, looks like you want to say something. Is that the case? Just let me know in the chat and I will unmute you. Okay, so nope. All right. So
Yeah.
Mr. Cotton would like to say something.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, and especially the presenters for this evening, the students at the Graceville Bible University, following this course that has been created by my lovely wife. I firstly want to thank you for being really brave this evening and presenting as you have your parts in this webinar. I'm very grateful to God for the opportunity of being part of this process, of having you as my guest on my radio show, and being part of the whole process and being here this evening. So it's really a privilege, and I'm very humbled by that. And to the two guest speakers, Miss Christella and also Miss Sharon, I thank you very much for what you shared, because what you shared this evening has liberated persons without a doubt. And you are the voice. You are the voices of many. So I want to just say with you that, state to you that my heart is with you and my prayers are with you both. And may you continue to be the voices for many out there that is the catalyst for change and liberation. And for everyone that is here this evening, it's really beautiful that you've taken the time to be here today. And we appreciate you for around the world, because I know of many persons who are here, even from the United States, that are here this evening. So we thank you.
Thank you. But before we close tonight, I want to end in a very calming and relaxing way. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to do a short meditation just for you to release anything that you may be carrying as a result of our time together. So let me share my screen. Can you see my screen? And can you hear? Can you guys hear? All right. And my students, please, if there's anyone that needs to be muted, please do that for me. And I invite you right now to...
Seeing and hearing.
Okay, wonderful. So now if you could all mute yourselves, please. Everyone mute yourself. And take a deep breath. Slow, deep breath in. Hold for a count of 7. And exhale slowly from your mouth. Take another deep breath in. And as you breathe in life. Breathe in hope. Breathe in courage. Breathe in strength. And then exhale slowly from your mouth. Any pain, hurt, sorrow, anything that you're carrying that is causing you to feel burdened, I invite you to release right now as you blow slowly from your mouth. As if you're blowing on a spoon with some hot soup. Inhale, life. Exhale, any emotion, any burden that you need to release at this time. Anything that is coming up for you, acknowledge it. Make a note of it. Tune into your body. Tune into your spirit. And anything that is arising right now that you may have suppressed in the past, allow it to arise. And take a deep breath in Hold for a count of 7 and exhale slowly from your mouth as you relax. Allow the presence of the Holy Spirit, Emmanuel, God with us, to breathe a fresh and a new life into your spirit. Tune in to what is happening on the inside of you, and know that His power, His presence is right here with you. Be still and know that He is God. There's nothing that you can experience that He's not aware of. So I invite you to lay your burdens upon Him. I invite you to lay your concerns, your challenges, your struggles. Take a deep breath in. Hold for a count of 7 and exhale slowly from your mouth. And as you remember your loved one or loved ones that you are mourning the loss of, I invite you to remember the lovely times, the beautiful times. I invite you to invite love, the love that you had for them, the love that they had for you. I invite you to allow that love to just blossom and grow bigger than the pain of the grief. Because that love is eternal, and that love will never die. So take a deep breath in. Hold for a count of 7. And exhale slowly from your mouth. And allow yourself to bask in that love. Allow yourself to welcome whatever is here. Even if it's painful, it's okay. Even if it hurts, it's okay. It's all part of the process. Inhale, life, love, joy, peace, courage. Take a deep breath and exhale slowly from your mouth. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes and know that you'll be okay. Even if right now you're not feeling okay. And that is also okay. So we'll stay on. The webinar will be on until you decide to leave. And if anyone needs to speak to any of us, I'll be able to create a chat room to do that, or else simply send an email. But I'll be sending an email to everyone as we follow up on our experience tonight. So again, I'm going to give the opportunity for anyone to share at this time. Thank you, Jardin. We'll stay on for 3 more minutes. If anybody has a desire to speak to any of us, the opportunity is still there for tonight. So at 10:30, we'll be closing off completely. So it's now 10:30. Congratulations, pioneers. You have done a wonderful job. And so, congrats.